A compromised system rarely announces itself. No alarms, no dramatic slowdown. Sometimes nothing obvious changes at all, except that someone else is quietly using your machine as if they own it. That's the unsettling reality of backdoor malware. It doesn't just break into systems, it builds a hidden entrance and leaves it open for ongoing control. And unlike noisy ransomware or obvious spyware, backdoors are built for patience, persistence, and invisibility. Welcome to BlueHat Cybersec Academy. Now here's what we're really unpacking today. Backdoor malware types, especially the ones used for remote access and control. We're going to break down how they actually operate, why they're so hard to detect, and how attackers design them for long-term exploitation instead of short-term chaos. Let's start with the core idea, what you could call a legitimate-looking second entrance. A backdoor is not just malware, it's an architectural decision made by an attacker. Instead of repeatedly exploiting a vulnerability, they establish a persistent method of access that bypasses normal authentication. Think of it like this. Instead of picking a lock every single time, the attacker installs a hidden duplicate key system and quietly keeps a copy. And from there, remote access backdoors open up a wide range of control, including full or partial system control, command execution from a remote attacker, file access and exfiltration, surveillance of user activity, and even installation of additional malware modules. The key insight here is simple but critical. Backdoors are rarely standalone threats. They are often infrastructure for much bigger attacks. Now, let's move into the first major category, remote access Trojans, or RATs, which sit in the full control category. Remote access Trojans are one of the most well-known forms of backdoor malware. And despite the Trojan label, their defining feature is control, not just deception. Once a RAT is installed, the attacker can control keyboard and mouse inputs, access files and directories, activate webcam and microphone, capture screenshots, and even install additional payloads silently. Now here's why RATs are so effective. They mimic legitimate remote administration tools. In fact, the technical overlap is so strong that distinguishing malicious RATs from legitimate tools often comes down to intent and context, not behavior alone. And here's the critical insight to remember. A RAT doesn't need to exploit a system repeatedly. One successful installation can lead to months of silent surveillance. Next, we shift to web shell backdoors, which represent exploitation through the browser layer. Web shells are backdoors planted on web servers. This usually happens through vulnerable applications, insecure plugins, or misconfigured file upload features. Once installed, attackers interact with the server through simple HTTP requests, often disguised as normal web traffic. Now let's break down why they're dangerous. They operate through standard web ports like 80 and 443. They blend into normal traffic logs. They can be extremely lightweight, sometimes just a single file, and they allow database access, file manipulation, and command execution. And here's the analytical perspective that matters most. Web shells expose a major blind spot in cybersecurity thinking, which is infrastructure trust. Organizations often monitor network traffic carefully, but fail to deeply inspect what legitimate web traffic is actually doing at the application layer. Now let's go deeper into system-level backdoors, where persistence is embedded directly into the operating system. These are more advanced and typically show up in targeted attacks. Instead of relying on user-level persistence, attackers attempt to embed themselves into system services, boot processes, authentication mechanisms, and even kernel-level components. So why does this matter? Because system-level backdoors can survive reboots, user logouts, and in some cases, even partial system updates. And here's the uncomfortable truth. At this level, detection becomes a battle of integrity verification. If the operating system itself is compromised, then even traditional security tools may no longer be fully trustworthy. Now we step into an even deeper layer, firmware and hardware-adjacent backdoors, often called the invisible layer. This is the most sophisticated category and also the hardest to deal with. These backdoors target components below the operating system, such as BIOS or Wi-Fi firmware, network interface controllers, and storage device firmware. These backdoors are rare, but when they exist, they are extremely persistent. So why are they so difficult to remove? Because reinstalling the operating system does nothing. Many security tools don't scan firmware layers, and updates are infrequent and inconsistent across vendors. And the critical takeaway here is this: the deeper the backdoor sits in the system stack, the closer it gets to being invisible by design. Next, we move into fileless backdoors, which represent a major shift in attacker strategy. These backdoors avoid writing traditional files to disk. Instead, they operate in memory or abuse legitimate system tools to execute malicious actions. Common techniques include PowerShell-based execution chains, WMI, or Windows Management Instrumentation abuse, and memory-resident payloads. Now here's why this is effective. Security tools often rely heavily on scanning files on disk, so if there's nothing persistent to scan, detection becomes significantly harder. And the analytical note here is important. Fileless malware represents a shift away from artifacts and toward exploiting trust in built-in system utilities. Now let's connect everything through command and control, or C2 backdoors, which solve the communication problem. A backdoor is not useful without communication. C2 infrastructure is what allows attackers to send commands to infected systems, receive stolen data, and update or modify malware behavior remotely. Common patterns include periodic beaconing, where systems check in regularly, encrypted traffic over HTTPS, and the use of legitimate cloud services to mask malicious activity. And the key insight here is this: modern backdoors are less about breaking into a system and more about maintaining a reliable conversation with it quietly and continuously. Now, why are backdoors so hard to catch? This is where the detection challenge becomes more conceptual than technical. Security systems often assume that known signatures indicate threats, unusual behavior is suspicious, and network anomalies are detectable early. But backdoors exploit all of these assumptions. They mimic legitimate processes, blend into normal traffic patterns, and operate intermittently to avoid behavioral thresholds. So the real issue is this: backdoor detection is not just pattern recognition, it's context analysis over time. Now let's talk defense and what actually works in the real world. No single solution is enough. Effective defense requires layered skepticism. That includes endpoint detection and response tools for behavioral monitoring, network traffic analysis for unusual communication patterns, strict privilege control to limit post-compromise damage, system integrity monitoring for unexpected changes, and regular auditing of services, scheduled tasks, and startup entries. But the most important defense is architectural. Assume compromise is possible and design systems that limit what a compromised node can do. And finally, the closing idea: the illusion of normal. Backdoor malware thrives on one simple idea: most systems are too trusting of themselves. Once a system assumes that internal activity is safe by default, the attacker no longer needs to break in repeatedly, they only need to get in once. And after that, the real attack isn't intrusion anymore, it's silence. Now for your challenge. Here are a few questions to test how well you've actually absorbed this. Which type of backdoor operates without writing files to disk, and why does that make it harder to detect? Why are web shells dangerous, even though they often look like normal HTTP traffic? If a system-level backdoor exists, why might traditional antivirus tools fail to fully detect it? And what exactly is the role of command and control, or C2, in the lifecycle of a backdoor attack? Drop your answers in the comments and see how many you can get right without checking notes. If you made it this far, you're not just memorizing definitions anymore. You're starting to see how these systems actually behave under the surface. This is part of the Malware Encyclopedia series from BlueHat Cybersec Academy. So if you want more breakdowns like this, where we don't just name malware, we dissect how it thinks, how it survives, and how it hides. Then like, share, and subscribe.